People don't want to wait. Yeah. Okay. Wait. Let me hit go live. So we're live now, and hit media assets, and I gotta hit that logo. So hey guys, we're live now. You got literally we got one of my favorites tonight, Robert Bitto from Mexico Unexplained. Every time he's on the show, it's amazing. So tonight we're gonna be getting into Mexican UFOs, alien contact. And yeah, I just always hit this subscribe button, guys. For those of you that for those of you that want to subscribe, please subscribe to the. It's free. It's absolutely free. So subscribe to the YouTube so you know when I go live. Subscribe to Rumble. Follow me on Rumble at Typical Skeptic Podcast on Rumble. Hit the notification bell on both, and then always hit the like button so you know when I'm going live, and that helps the algorithm. So again, about my guest today, he's been building his platform for a while, and his work is always flawless when it comes to the things that go down south of the border paranormally. And who that is Robert Bitto, and he's the owner of Mexico Unexplained. He's been crafting his talent at Mexico Unexplained for a long time. He really specializes in the culture of Mexico and the history of Mexico and all the paranormal events that go down there. And I asked him specifically tonight if we could get into like Mexican UFOs and, alien contact cases. Like from what I know about that stuff, I know of Jaime Maussan. So we'll see, and the stuff he used to put out, which was pretty amazing. But I want to see what Robert thinks. And we're going to get into a lot of other stuff because Robert knows a lot of history. And a little bit more about my guest. Robert Bitto is the author, researcher, and creator of Mexico Unexplained with over 30 years experience in Mexico as a student, corporate professional, and founder of Sueños Latin Imports. Robert has dedicated himself to uncovering the country's legends, mysteries, and hidden history. He holds an MBA, a BBA, and an MA in Latin American Studies from the University of New Mexico. He also served as the San Diego chapter president of Mensa 2015 to 2016, and now based in Southern California. He continues exploring the unknown while working on his book. Well, I think he moved out of California, but he could tell you guys that. And it's my big pleasure to welcome my good friend and one of my favorite guests back to the show, Robert. Thanks so much for coming back on, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and sorry for the delay. I apologize to you and to the listeners and viewers. It was all my fault. It had nothing to do with Rob or any technical issues. It was 100% my fault. So I'm sorry about that, and I'm very happy to be back.
Yeah,
And
it's weird. It's the energies are really off lately. You know what I mean with everybody.
and what is with that? I have to tell you something that happened. I got a birthday card from my mom yesterday, and I called her and I said, "What are you sending me a birthday card for?" And she said, "Oh, I guess I got the wrong month." And there's a lot of stuff like that happening lately where people are mixing up dates and things like that. And that's what happened with me. I thought we were on for tomorrow, but today is fine. And, I'm always prepared and I always like to talk about this stuff. But to what you were saying, there is something, I think there is something afoot. And you were telling me before we started about having to ban people and stuff, and I found lately that people are just meaner for some reason online and weirder, you know, accusing you of doing things and acting certain ways and all of this stuff. So it just seems like there's a lot of weirdness going on. And
Yeah,
like
you
I
know,
said, I'll circle back to me. I'm not going to use that as an excuse for what I did. It's 100% my fault that I thought I was supposed to be on tomorrow. But
it's
I'm
totally okay. Yeah, it's like I don't know what's going on. I think it's something in the air. You know what I mean? I really feel like we're in like full moon energy, even though we're not in full moon. And it was like this during the Lions Gate, or and I know that's like kind of like a new age term, but there definitely was a full moon during the Lions Gate, and you could feel the intensified energies, and especially the closer the moon got to the Earth, like the more you could see the moon, the more magnetic things became and the more the craziness came out, I don't know if they have a term for that in Spanish, but or what they think about that. Do they think that are they superstitious in that way? Do they believe that the full moon causes like craziness or like we do?
Sure, they're very much traditional Mexican culture is very, as we would call it, it's a loaded term, but superstitious. There's that, let's say they put a lot of meaning into things. Okay. That would probably be a more politically correct way of saying that, instead of superstition. Everything has a meaning. And so if things are out of whack, then there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
But we can't use that as an excuse. like I said, I'm not using that as an excuse for not knowing that today was the 27th.
Yeah.
But
I just want to say real quick, Robert, a big shout out to my friend Candace. I think you know who she is. She has the name Black Uni Gryphon in the chat. She's become a really good friend of mine, and it's her birthday today. I saw in the chat. So happy birthday, Candace. So this episode will go out to you in some way. She's amazing. She knows a lot about history. She's very well versed. She was one of the first people to tell me about the automatons, which were like the ancient robots back in the day that the Greeks had and stuff like that, which they weren't like robot like technology, but somewhat, you know what I mean? They had like function to them and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I think one stood on the shores of Greece and would sling weaponry at enemies, from the shore, which was interesting.
wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
There was nothing like that in ancient Mexico. The only thing that comes close is there was an Aztec princess, and she was very spoiled. This is true. This is a true story. And whenever she took a lover, she had an artist craft a doll of the lover in different positions and stuff like that. And then she had a room where she had all the dolls. So
wow. What
yeah.
did she do? I mean, was it like a voodoo type thing or?
She kept them to, I guess, remind herself of the guys that she was with. And then sometimes she would go in the room and just feel to make herself feel powerful, I guess. But
Wow.
yeah, she made these effigies of all these guys that she was with. But
Wow.
yeah. I
That's
don't know why
crazy.
that came to mind when you were talking about automatons, because I was trying to think, is there a parallel there in Mexico? And no, there's nothing.
But
That's the closest it gets.
when I asked you about I didn't know if we would have enough to fill a whole show, and of course we can get into cryptids if you want to and stuff. But is there a lot to talk about when we talk about Mexican UFOs and contact cases
Sure.
and abductions? Because what
Yeah.
I know of is I used to see the Jaime Maussan videos back in the day, and what was weird was Jaime Maussan used to show some really weird UFOs, and I felt like I had a sighting here that reminded me of something I would see on a Jaime Maussan video. I saw an orb, and it was above the BP gas station, and it was changing colors and all. It was green and purple and brown and all kinds of stuff, and it was really weird, but it reminded me when I saw it, I was like, man, that reminds me of something I saw Jaime Maussan back in the day. But was it, and then also, is he real? Is he known for having real footage? And I'll let you. Yeah.
Well, Jaime Maussan, I've called him in a lot of my shows, I've called him the abuelo of ufology in Mexico. Abuelo is a grandfather because he's been a serious UFO researcher almost to the point of being naive in a lot of cases, because he leaves everything on the table and he accepts everything at face value at first. Okay. So if somebody comes to him and says, for example, I found these two alien mummies right away. Okay, yeah, let's look at them or whatever. The whole alien mummy thing that happened 2 years ago, that he was involved with that. But his involvement with UFOs goes back to 1970. So he's been doing this for 55 years publicly. And when there was a UFO flap over the Gulf of Mexico, now I guess called the Gulf of America. I don't know. I can't get used to name changes for geography ever, really. But in the Gulf of Mexico, there are oil platforms, in, off the coast of Mexico, just like we have them off the coast of Texas and Louisiana. It's all part of that whole geography. There were oil platforms off the coast of Mexico, and there were strange lights above these oil platforms. And some skeptics were saying that it was the platforms themselves emanating the light, but they scrambled the Air Force, and I did a show called The Mexican Air Force versus the Flying Saucers. And in that episode, I actually have the cockpit voice recording of some of the Air Force pilots, and I do the translation, and they're seeing these lights that are moving. So they're not part of oil fires on the oil platforms at all. And the government of Mexico said, okay, let's investigate this. And this was, I believe, in 2004. And it was the first time ever that a national government, a world government, admitted that there was such a thing as a UFO and that it needed to be investigated. So that was pretty groundbreaking. And they didn't really come to any conclusions. Jaime Maussan was involved, and he's very well connected because he knows all of these people. He knows the right researchers to talk to and everything. And he has a show that I subscribe to. He has a YouTube channel, and there's always stuff there. He posts multiple things per day, usually. So,
Wow.
you were saying it was interesting. You were saying that you didn't know if there was enough material, but the fact that you're saying that shows why I started Mexico Unexplained to begin with, because a lot of people don't know that there's a lot of stuff going on in Mexico, whether it's the UFO phenomenon or cryptids or other anomalies, weird things going on and stuff like that. So, yeah, there are a lot of UFO sightings. My last show that I did last weekend was about, sometimes I concentrate on UFO shapes, right? So last Sunday, I did a show about dark triangles, triangular shaped UFOs over Mexico. And those, since the show's fresh in my mind, I could talk a little bit about that. Since the late 90s, those have been prevalent. They've been popping up. And some of the most famous dark triangles appeared over the zone of silence. It's Mexico's Bermuda Triangle area in the desert. We've talked about that on your show before. But this diary of Hector Alvarez, he was a park ranger in this Mapimi ecological zone. It's a reserve that's in the northern part of Mexico. It straddles 3 states. And this park ranger was seeing anomalous things, lights in the sky, dark triangles. And he was writing in his diary. He was keeping track of it because his superiors, he was filing reports to his superiors about the things that he was seeing because he was working during the night shift. He was staffing the ranger station. And his superiors thought he was a kook or something and they didn't want to mess around with it. Nobody likes paperwork, right? So that was probably part of it. But he kept a diary because he wanted to make sure that he kept track of stuff if his superiors weren't interested. And that diary made it online. And it was, it made it online after Hector disappeared. He disappeared, I believe, in April of 2015. April of 2013. And then the diary appeared in April 2013. He disappeared in March of 2013. So he disappeared. Then a month later, the diaries appeared, and you cannot find them on the internet anymore. I started Mexico Unexplained in January of 2016. So in January 2016, the diaries were still on the internet. And I took some screenshots, and I didn't think that I needed to download anything or save anything. I basically translated some stuff and took notes and everything. And I thought I could always go back and find these diaries, but they're gone. You can't find them anywhere on the internet. And so I did make a show about that, but yeah, no one knows what happened to Hector. Some people think that he was either abducted or someone, the most likely scenario is that someone tried to shut him up, whether it was a governmental agency. People in Mexico who live around that biosphere reserve believe that NASA has something going on there. That there was an observatory that was built there and some other buildings that NASA controls. So I don't know.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, like one thing I was going to ask you about was so there's some crash retrieval lore from Mexico too, and
Mhm.
I was able to find two. Koyame in 1974, or no, one. I guess there's one, and it says there. I guess there was a crash retrieval. Do you know about this?
Yeah, supposedly it was a classic flying saucer, right? And it crashed into a small plane and then it went down. And then supposedly the people who got to that saucer first, they all died. And then the military got involved. The United States military took over. And then supposedly this craft ended up in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So, yeah,
Wow. Yeah,
that's the
from
story
what
in
I
a
know.
nutshell. There's really nothing else to say about it, but some locals some locals found bodies of Mexican, military people who the first people who went to investigate. They were all dead, presumably from radiation. And then the Americans came a few days later and took the craft away and took it across the border. It happened in northern Mexico. And there was even a book written about this. And the authors were on, with Art Bell. That was actually the first time I heard about it on Coast to Coast.
Wow, I didn't know. I never heard that one. That's an
Yeah.
interesting. I gotta check out that Art Bell. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Um, do you see like a cross border cooperation between like the U.S. and Mexico a lot when it's dealing with these UFO cases? Like, does the U.S. tend to seem? And it's interesting. I just want to back up. It seems like Wright Patterson was the place where a lot of stuff went to back in the day. You know?
Yeah. And as far as cooperation goes, I have no idea. And I don't think anybody else knows either because it's all secret, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not in on it, so I don't know. But it, local Mexicans always talk about gringos showing up, you know. So the Americans will show up and do their thing and take things away or whatever. And that always seems to happen, even connected with cryptids too. Um, and even the black eyed children. So I don't know. Mexicans tend to blame America for a lot of things. The price of tortillas go up. Oh, it's the United States. It's their fault. I don't know. But
That's
in connection, yeah.
We had a question from Coley. She wants to know. She says, "What is the government involvement like in Mexico? Like when it comes to UFOs, like and disclosure, are they really involved, or are they
They're
more
very
like?"
involved. Yeah. Like I was saying about Jaime Maussan, they were the very first government in the world to say we need to investigate this UFO stuff. And if it's extraterrestrials, well, whatever. Let the chips fall where they may. And so they were very open. And I think that was in 2004. So that was over 20 years ago. And I don't know about the current government. It changes with presidents. So, they have their first female president now. And she's very, as they would say, progressive. I don't know. I try not to get into politics, but she's like very far to the left. And so, I don't know her personal views on this. I guess that's something I could look into, but She's a very new president. So we don't know. It depends on who's in charge, really. But so far, the government's been pretty good.
Yeah.
And
This is a
back
total.
to
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and back to what you were saying about cooperation. Uh, you know, the United States rules with the heavy hand in Latin America, not just Mexico, all the other countries down there. And so I think those countries do what we tell them to do. And when it
Yeah.
comes to like, oh, you had a, like, oh, a flying saucer crashed in your territory. Well, we're coming in, we're going to get it, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's, I think, the United States' stance towards this stuff. And they'll
Yeah.
go in and take it. And so that's what happened. There were a couple of other crashes too that happened. And, that's the same scenario. The locals or whatever will say, oh, the gringos showed up, and that's it. And then the story ends.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That's um, and let me see here. Let me see here. I was going to ask you about the abduction cases and the contact cases. Like, what distinguishes Mexican abduction narratives from UFS cases, if there is any? And there any like symbols, beings described, messages, or after effects, or anything like that you find compelling, or are there a
Well,
lot of cases?
yeah, there are quite a few cases, and um, they're pretty typical. You know, there are there are some famous cases that sound very familiar. If you've never heard of these specific cases before, they sound very familiar because they include the same sort of ingredients that we find in other abduction cases throughout the world. There's missing time, um, strange beings, they're taken aboard the craft, they show you things, they give you a message about the earth, and, so on. And so there are specific ones. One of the most famous abduction cases, well, it's funny because my own dad, when he heard my episode on YouTube, he said, no, he wasn't. Salvador Villanueva Medina was this taxi driver. And my dad said, no, he wasn't abducted. He went willingly. And yeah, my dad was right. He did go willingly. So it was technically not an abduction. And this happened in the 1950s, I believe 1954. It's one of the earliest cases of um, experiencing aliens, I guess, because technically it wasn't an abduction. It's one of the earliest in the world. And he was a taxi driver. He broke down near the border with the United States, but it was in the desert. And he woke up one morning because he had to sleep in his taxi. It was at night when it broke down. And then these beings came over a hill in the desert and came to his car. And they were tall as what we would call Nordics, which happens to be the most popular alien species that appears in Mexico. The Nordics, then the Greys. Okay. And I think
See,
around the
what I was
world,
thinking, Robert, was if there wasn't some reality to it, like there has to be some reality to these creatures because, like, like why would they, like how would that cross cultures like that? That it's like it seems like around the world they see the same aliens, like the Nordics, the Greys, the reptilians, the insectoids. You know what I mean? Something seems, weird about that. I don't know.
yeah. But in this case, the taxi driver thought that they were gringos. They thought they were Americans because they were tall and blonde, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's another case, and then, okay, to wrap up this, and then we're going to skip to the abduction of a teenage girl and similarities with the way that the aliens looked. Okay, so I'll wrap this case up, then we'll go to the girl. In the case of the taxi driver, he then got taken aboard this craft, which was a flying saucer on like a tripod, and it was in the desert, and he got in the craft. And then later he wrote a book. Well, it was ghost written. It was written by somebody else. It was called Estuve en el planeta Venus, and meaning I was on the planet Venus. because supposedly they took him to the planet Venus. Now, in the 1950s, if you know anything about the history of UFOs or whatever, a lot of people thought that these flying saucers or whatever we were seeing in the skies came from Venus, and then Mars later on, right? And I guess since then it's gone further afield. But people were thinking that there was a civilization on Venus. And so to this simple taxi driver, he thought that that's where he was going. And that's why the book is called Estuve en el Planeta Venus. But, they showed him around. He described everything in great detail. And a translation of that book does not exist. I have the PDF in Spanish, but someone needs to translate that book. But anyway, so back to the Nordics. There was an abduction, supposedly, of a teenage girl outside the Santa Lucia Air Force Base in around 1970, 70 or 71. She was a teenage girl, and her father was an Air Force officer at the base. And they lived in base housing, and their house was closest to the fence. It was like the farthest away and close to the fence where there was a big field and all this stuff. And she woke up one night and a big craft had landed or was hovering. And then outside came this white guy. That's how she described it. A white guy with a beard. And he spoke flawless Spanish and asked her if she wanted to go into the craft. She went into the craft, and everyone who was in the craft was very pale and white. And all the UFO researchers at the time, it made it into the pulp magazines and stuff. They said that they were like the Nordics. But then some people were thinking that this was either an American or a Soviet experimental craft that skipped through dimensions, and those white, the Nordics, the white people that she was seeing, it was either Americans or people from the Eastern Bloc, Russians, Polish, Czech, the Eastern Bloc communist countries, who their scientists during the Cold War all worked together, right? East Germans and Czechs and all of that, and work with the Soviets. And so some people later said that this was either the Americans or the Eastern Bloc Soviet communist countries with an experimental craft, because she went on board and supposedly got transported somewhere, but she said that the craft didn't feel like it was moving. And then they went through the whole rigmarole of this is how our society is and all of this stuff. But a lot of people think that there is a more terrestrial example that we should be looking at here, that this was some experimental government craft. And this poor woman, she was hounded by the UFO press when she was just a teenage girl. And then she refused to do interviews until she was in her 40s or something, and came out and, said, nothing's changed. Everything I said when I was a girl, that all was true. That's all that I saw, But, so we don't know if in that case those were real aliens, the Nordics per se, or if they were just, white Europeans who looked very fair,
Yeah.
And to some Mexicans, someone with brown hair is considered blonde, You'll call somebody Rubio who doesn't really even have like what we would consider snowy blonde hair, So I don't know. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But these make for good stories, and there's still a lot to talk about.
Jason had a question. Jason wanted to know the Jonathan Wayland. He sounds like an American, but he says the recovery was in Peru or Mexico. Are you familiar with this?
No, I've never heard that name before.
I can look it up real quick on
And
BT.
that, because I haven't heard the name before, doesn't mean that it's not, you know, that it's not connected with Mexico. It means that I just don't know about it. It could be something that I could research. But yeah, I've never heard of that before.
I'm just going to type it in ChatGPT real quick and see what it comes up with. Maybe it'll be something interesting. It says, instant summary. In 1997, during what he describes as Operation Laser Strike in Peru, Wade Gant and his unit were tasked with recovering what was initially thought to be a downed aircraft. Upon arrival, they instead found a teardrop-shaped craft wedged in rocky terrain. So it was an American, and he recovered a craft in Peru, I guess. You know, and
Wow.
it's his name. It's Wade Gant, WEY. I can text it to you after if you want to research it because I know
Yeah,
you
I'd
do
like to look into it.
stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah, I'd like to
yeah,
look into it. Maybe on
yeah,
my next buying trip to Peru, I can go down to that place where it happened. I don't know.
that would be cool. That would be cool. What about the Carlos Diaz case? Do you know about that? The
Gosh, Carlos Diaz.
It says
Ye
Tepoztlan. It says I got some of these questions from ChatGPT. It says Richard Burgers on the ships of light case. Any elements that remain stubborn. I guess this Carlos Diaz has a ships of light case.
Yeah, that was outside of Mexico City. I did a show on him a long time ago, so that's not fresh in my memory, but that was happening, yeah, outside of Mexico City, and he was being abducted several times by, aliens. And I
Wow,
believe those were the Greys that were getting to him. But
wow, that's
yeah,
that's,
there
that's
are there are several there are several pretty famous cases, but they don't make it outside of Mexico a lot of the times.
yeah, yeah. That's so interesting. Like that. And then have you cataloged any indigenous perspectives like the Nahua, the Maya, the Zapotec, the parallel modern contact stories, or anything like that? Are there any ancient alien stories?
Well, those are hard to determine because what's an alien and what's a god, right? And
Yeah,
not to borrow from Eric von Daniken or whatever, but if an alien came down, let's say, in our way of looking at extraterrestrials the way we do now, if one came down 2,000 years ago, they would probably be seen as a demigod or a god, right? So there are there are tons of stories about star beings and people coming from the stars and all of that stuff. But over time and with legends, how they work, and how they change over time and stuff, it's hard to really get to the meat of a lot of these things.
yeah,
Like let me tell you this. There was a legend that there's a northern tribe in Mexico, and there's a legend, supposedly, the Seri people. There's a legend that the star beings came down and mated with the furry men, right?
yeah,
And that sounds like, oh, an alien race came down and then intermarried, whatever, with the primitive hominids, right? But it was later debunked. And when investigators looked at this supposed legend told by the elders, they were just saying this to people to try to get tourists out there and, to try to sell stuff and everything. And it wasn't really a real legend. So there's a lot of junk out there. And then with the true legends, like I said, it's hard to cut to the heart of it and really try to understand what's really going on or what happened 3,000 years ago. So,
yeah, yeah. I agree. It's let me see here. What about? Do you know anything about the Ebani phenomenon, the EBANI? These were like serpentine worm UAPs that flew over Mexico City.
you know what? I've never heard of that before. But let me tell you about Mexico, and I'm not trying to deflect from that. I'm
No,
honest
it's
with
okay.
telling you I have no idea what that is. But Mexico City is such a hot spot for UFOs. I'm not surprised that I haven't heard of that specific case. because there's always something going on there. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact that there are so many eyeballs there. And what do I mean by that? It's one of the most populated cities in the world. 30 years ago, I lived there for a while when I was working there. It's a monster city. And I go down there every once in a while. I use it. I fly in there and I go when I do my business, go, off into the country and everything. Sometimes I use Mexico City as my base of operations. It's a monster city. It's crazy. And so you have 22 million people there. You have 44 million eyes looking to the sky. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And one of the most popular UFO sightings or most seen UFO sightings happened, and I think I might have talked about this before on your show. It was during a Good Morning America kind of show that they have in Mexico. So over their chilaquiles and frosted flakes and, the stuff that they eat for breakfast in Mexico, people were watching TV and they were watching a live shot of Popocatépetl, which is the volcano that towers over Mexico City in the distance. And it erupts. When I was down there 30 years ago, when I was working there, it was, it was puffing. It's no big deal. People aren't afraid of it. They don't think that it's going to turn into like a Pompeii situation or something, although it could really, You can't predict volcanoes. But anyway, there was a camera that was fixed on the volcano. And you can go to webcamsdemexico.com, webcams de Mexico, DE Mexico, and you can see a live camera focused on the volcano. But for this morning show, they were focused on the volcano, and sure enough, millions of viewers watched this live. A little flying disc came out of the volcano, and everybody saw it. And the commentator was at a loss for words. And that's something, I did a show on that also, that UFOs are connected to volcanoes.
They are.
In
They
Mexico.
They go in and out of them, and they go seamlessly. Yeah. That they can go through the lava and everything. Yeah. It's really strange. Like there are other places too around the world, right? It's like
it's interesting because ancient Mexicans, almost every culture in ancient Mexico, believed that volcanoes were portals to another world. Okay, that you could go into a volcano and then there's some other world in there, and there are volcanic, cinder cones or remnants of volcanoes that still are, are tied to the paranormal. I went to a series of volcanoes called the Siete Luminarias in the southern part of Guanajuato state on my last buying trip to Mexico, because I had heard that there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on with these seven sisters, these dead volcanoes that some of them have lakes, water in them. And there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on there. Even one time, the First Lady of Mexico went with Uri Geller, the mystic from Israel, went with Uri Geller to one of the volcanoes, and there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on. And the press had a field day with that because, the president's wife was entertaining kooks, kind of like Nancy Reagan and the astrologer, That was the
I remember that. Yeah.
Right, that was the Mexican version. What's she doing with this guy, this supposed spoon bending charlatan or whatever, in these volcanoes. And I went to those volcanoes, and the landscape there is really otherworldly. When you're in some of them, when you're inside some of them, they're very low craters. You can walk up the side and then, go down in. And then there's a tunnel that goes through. But the landscape is pretty stark. in some of them. It's all like white. And, I can see that a science fiction movie could easily be filmed in those. But there's stories of lights in the sky and, a whole bunch of paranormal stuff. I was hoping when I was there that I was going to get to see this indigenous ghost, this woman who supposedly appears to hikers and she's in distress and she's speaking an old Indian, native language that no one knows. And I was hoping to see her. And I've told this story a couple of times about this woman. And there was a medium in New Zealand. I was on her show, and she wanted to go to Mexico to help free this spirit because this woman has been trapped in the volcano for 1,000, 2,000 years or something like that, supposedly, as the story goes. You'll be hiking and then you'll run across a native woman who's begging and pleading with you, but it's in a different language that nobody understands. That's one of the stories connected with the volcanoes. But there's a lot of UFO activity there too. I
Wow.
didn't see anything though.
Where is the most? I mean, are the pyramid areas very active in Mexico? Like Chichen Itza. Do people see a lot of UFOs around that area?
You would be surprised. The ruins are really not the hot spots for UFOs. And it's funny because the volcanoes and then also volcanic plugs, there's like a couple of what they call peñas. Peña really is like a big rock. That's what they call. But there are volcanic plugs, kind of like Devil's Tower in Wyoming, where Close Encounters of the Third Kind was filmed.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there are a couple of big rocks like that, volcanic plugs, peñas, that have a lot of paranormal, activity or going on around them. One that I'm thinking about is Peña de Bernal, and that has had a lot of weird stuff happen. Aliens, weird creatures, and and strangely enough, a lot of sightings of Saint Germain. Okay, the saint. If you look up Saint Germain, you could do shows and shows on him. But supposedly he shows up at the Peña de Bernal, and there's some Masonic connection there too with that rock. But strange creatures, aliens, grays have been seen on the slopes of that mountain by hikers, just like
Wow.
in the forest or whatever. Yeah, it's bizarre. And
Wow. I wonder if they're like you're coming from inner Earth or something like that. You know,
possibly, yeah.
are there any inner Earth myths? I know we were talking about UFOs mostly, but are there inner Earth myths in the Mexican culture as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's the whole underground. They believe that there is, well, there's the afterlife is underground, okay, in most cultures. And they also believe that there are underground civilizations of different levels, okay? And there's even a group that believes that an offshoot of the Maya went underground, and that explains where the Maya went. What happened to the Maya after the collapse? Um, and some people think that the zone of silence, like what we were talking about earlier with the disappearing park ranger Hector Alvarez and his disappearing diaries, that area there, that an offshoot of the Maya called the Yellow Maya went underground and built underground structures there, and that's why you know compasses and other instruments of aircraft go out of whack, and there's strange magnetic anomalies and stuff like that because there is a civilization that's under the earth there. And there are some stories of people going into caves, and this could be, more legend than anything, but people going into caves, usually connected with volcanoes, and seeing entire cities underneath, you know.
Yeah.
So there's one famous story of a shepherd who was tending his sheep on the side of a volcano, and a sheep wandered into one of the caves, and then he thought he saw light and heard noise. He kept walking, and then there was an entire like inner earth that he saw, like a golden city, and other people supposedly went in there too and saw that same thing. And
Wow,
so
that's amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are stories and there are legends and there are deep-seated religious beliefs from the ancient people that there are things going on underground.
It seems like a whole, yeah, like a whole. I mean, it seems like a lot of cultures have, like it's not just, it seems like a lot of cultures have that theory that, like, so it makes me think there's some reality to it, that there is like a, like the Native Americans, I believe there was a whole underground civilization as well, right? It's
Well,
like
didn't the Hopi believe that they emerged from the inner earth? I think. I'm not sure. I could be mixing up tribes, but yeah.
Well, I heard that that like during the cataclysms, I thought that the ant people took the Hopian caves or something like that. Did you ever hear that story or something like that? That the
Yeah, I grew up in the Southwest and I heard a lot of stories, like that. And that, among the Navajo too, they spent some time underground for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me see what other stuff that I have topics here. Uh, and then yeah, we kind of talked about the ancient alien stuff. Let me see here. I
Well,
have
can I say something? Can I say something
sure.
about ancient alien artifacts? Um, as you know, and maybe some of your viewers don't know exactly what my background is, but since 1999, I've been importing arts and crafts from Mexico, South America, and Central America. In a few weeks, it'll be 26 years that I've been in business. And I'd like to consider myself somewhat of an expert when it comes to arts and crafts, okay? Because I've been doing it for so long. And there are a lot of alien artifacts that are out there now. And I can tell from just seeing them on YouTube without holding them in my hands, I can tell you that most of them are fake and they're bad fakes. And I can tell you how they're made too. And I can tell you how they age them, how they make them look the way they do, because I have so much experience with arts and crafts, and especially in Mexico. So when I see a craft, and people have asked me throughout my whole career, I guess, especially when I had a retail store, people would bring things into my store. And, even after the store, closed and I was doing this wholly online like I am now with just a warehouse, people will bring me things and say, what do you think of this? Not necessarily alien stuff, but, is this like a real Maya pot? Or is this a figurine from the Aztecs? And I can tell what's real and what isn't because of my experience. And a lot of these alien artifacts, I hate to ruin the party for people, but I would say most of them are fake. And most of them are poorly done. And they're done fast so that they can sell them to tourists. And, sorry to say.
Wow. I mean, but like some of them look like they're being dug up and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, there are techniques that you can use, like putting kerosene. You can put kerosene or hit these things if they're big artifacts, you can get a rag with kerosene and then hit the artifact and it'll make it look really old and then rub some dirt in there. Okay. To age clay stuff, it's funny that the Mexicans use kerosene to do that. And yeah, so I've had quite a few smelly shipments come in because of how they treat some of the stuff. But then the smaller artifacts, now this is kind of nasty, but like the smaller artifacts, like, oh, senor, I have an alien head that I want to sell you, senor. You know, you can be at a you can be at a pyramid site, and I'm like, oh God, 30 years I've been oh geez, since 1989. When I was a student down there in 1989, people would come up to me and say, "Sí, es auténtico," and that's a cognate for the word authentic, right? Es auténtico, sí, es real, it's real. This is a real artifact. Okay, so what they do for the smaller artifacts, if they say, Senor, here's a little alien head, they pass them through cows, okay? They force the cow to eat these small little things, and then it goes through the cow's digestive system, and that's how they age a lot of the smaller pieces. I know it's kind of gross, but
I was just looking over your website now, your Sueños Imports, because I never looked at it before, and like, because I was seeing if you had any real cool like occult stuff or anything like that, like something really cool that I might want to order from you, like, because like, that would be really cool. Like I kind of like that kind of stuff, like yeah, this is really interesting. Like, so you've been doing this for a long time, huh? Like the imports, like.
well, September 16th, 1999 is when I first started. So we're coming up on 26 years.
Wow. That's
And
so
yeah,
cool.
I've had a lot of occult stuff. And I've had, people always ask me, and I don't know if you've asked me on your show before, but people always ask me, have you ever had anything in your possession that was possessed or had a spirit attached to it? And I have to say yes. I mean, I've imported hundreds of thousands of pieces, and I've had some weird things happen with some of the pieces. I'm not sure if we've talked about that before, but yeah, that happens too sometimes. And
I kind of like the Day of the Dead stuff. I'm looking through your stuff
yeah,
now. I would want a Day of the Dead skull. I think that would be cool to have, like because I do. I mean, do you have something like? I mean, I know you have some Day of the Dead stuff in here, but do you have like a Day of the Dead skull? Do you know, or like that would be like decorative that I could put like back here on my shelf?
I've sold thousands of those. I will send you one for free. Don't worry
No
about it. I
way.
still have your address. You'll get a surprise in the mail from me next week. Okay?
That's awesome, man. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
wow.
it's
That's
no
amazing.
problem. You know, I'm in Western Nebraska now, and so I'm in a house, and in my house on this property, I have my warehouse. So, unlike cramped Southern California, I was living this urban existence in San Diego, and I had to have a separate warehouse space, and it was expensive as hell. Oh my God. Here I am in Nebraska where there's all this space, and I have everything here, you know? So I
Yeah.
don't have to jump in my car and fight Southern California traffic to get to a warehouse.
I mean, I'd even pay for the shipping. I'll pay for the shipping or whatever. You know what I mean? Just let me know. You know what I
Don't
mean?
worry
Like.
about it. No way. No way am I going to make you pay for shipping. No way. You're going to get something really nice in the mail from me. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah,
happy
that's
to do it
amazing.
for you. I'm
One thing I
very
wanted to
happy
bring
to
up,
do it for
I always find this funny to talk about is it's off the topic of UFOs, but the Satanic Church. Because the reason why I find this so funny is because like Mexico's such a Christian country, right? So like I find it odd that this Satanic Church just popped up in Mexico, but it did. So what's going on with that? Do you have any news on it or?
Well, it's because people turn to stuff like that because they think that the Catholic Church is too weak. Okay. And in the age of cartels and violence and all of this stuff, and how poor people are and how desperate people are now, they want to turn to something that has power. And, you know, a little saint, a little icon of a saint with chubby little angels flying around it and all of this stuff, some Renaissance looking thing, that's not going to cut it. You want somebody you want to turn to a deity or an entity that's going to put a curse on your enemies. None of this, chubby angels, soft stuff. You want somebody who's going to like do the job, make you rich, put a curse on people, destroy your enemies. And that's where these alternative religions and the Church of Satan, or, the Satanic Temple in Catemaco, Veracruz, that's where this is all coming from. And there were a couple of visits by popes. Pope Benedict XVI went down to Mexico twice to try to deal with the growing movements of these folk saints and the darker forces. But like I said, people see the Santa Muerte like that's the most holy death. It's a Grim Reaper statue. That's the most popular saint besides the Virgin of Guadalupe in all of Mexico. And it's not even Catholic. It's not sanctioned by the church at all. And it's a gruesome looking scene. I've gotten in trouble by using words like this on my channel. When I say it's hideous or gruesome, people come back at me and say, no, the Santa Muerte is beautiful. I pray to her. It's a female too. I pray to her all the time. It's beautiful. Don't use those words. She's not hideous. It's a skeleton. It's a Grim Reaper with a scythe, the sickle. And there's always an owl too connected with this. And it's
a lot of the gangs, like the Mexican gangs or the El Salvadorian gangs, like MS-13, I think they pray to Santa Muerte.
Yeah, yeah. And Jesus Valverde too. That's another saint that is not recognized by the Catholic Church, but keeps growing in popularity. He's like a Mexican Robin Hood character. And the narco people down there, they they have altars to him and stuff like that. And it's funny because when I had a retail store in Phoenix for 10 years, I had a retail store, and I had a Phoenix cop come in, this big buff blonde guy, I remember him. And he had all these tattoos and stuff. And he was coming up, he was buying a present for his girlfriend. He came up to the cash register, and I had a basket of little trinkets by the cash register. And I had little images of Jesus Malverde. And the cop looked down and he goes, oh, no, 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 no. And I was like, what's going on? What are you doing here? And he said, no, not this guy. No, no, no. And I said, well, what do you mean? Come on now. What's going on? He said, whenever I see this guy, there's always big trouble. Like I'm about to get shot kind of trouble. And I was like, no, I'm not into that. I'm just selling this stuff, Because let's say he's gone into like drug busts or whatever. There may be an altar to this Jesus Malverde. So wherever Jesus Malverde pops up, that image of this folk saint, there's usually trouble connected with drugs or guns and things like that. And that's why when he saw these little trinkets in my basket, he was like, no, 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 no. Because whenever he sees that on the job, it always means trouble. But yeah, but other people will believe in these too. Okay, the narco people love the Santa Muerte and also this other Jesus Malverde. And so then the people follow suit too. Well, if it's powerful enough for these guys, then I should use them too. Because then they'll do what I need to get done. Instead of, like I said, going back to my tired example of, this immaculate looking saint with the chubby angels flying around them or whatever, that's just this soft stuff. In hard times, you need this hardcore stuff. And so that's why people are turning to this. And that's where that satanic temple that you referenced came from. It came from all of these folk beliefs gaining, popularity. And in the Mexican Constitution, they guarantee freedom of religion. So it was a big fight that the people who started this satanic temple in Veracruz, it was a uphill battle that they had to fight, despite the clause in the Constitution that guarantees their freedom. But the guy behind the temple, he crossed all his T's and he dotted all of his I's when he got the paperwork filed to, build the building, to get all of the things squared away. Because people were trying to thwart the whole building of the temple by trying to bog him down with paperwork. But all his paperwork was all in order. He was outsmarting everybody in that sense. So there couldn't have been any delays bureaucratically for him to open because he did everything by the book. And so it opened, and people still have a problem with it. It's only been there for a few years. But there are other satanic or occult groups that are throughout the country. It's a big country, there are a lot of people there. So there was one group that I was reading about, and I was thinking of doing a show about them, but I decided not to because I just didn't want to get involved. They were called the Hijos de Baphomet. Now, how good is your Spanish? Can you tell what I just said? Hijos de Baphomet.
It's the some legion of Baphomet, I would say.
The children of Baphomet. The children.
And what's weird, Robert? This girl came on my show and she said one of her clients got possessed by Baphomet. And then I was watching YouTube the other night, and that's weird when we said that a huge crow just appeared outside my window. It sounded huge because I could hear it. It went wah. It was really loud. Like when I said, it was real. It just now it's out there. I can hear it. They do that sometimes. They annoy me. People say that crows are good and they just want to be friends, but sometimes they scare me. But anyway, what I was saying was, then some other woman came on YouTube and said that she got involved in witchcraft and she had an encounter with Baphomet. It seems like Baphomet is coming into the collective for some reason,
And okay, we're recording this on August 27th. There was a shooting today. Okay, I don't know if you heard about it. There was a shooting in Minneapolis today. It was a trans woman, who got whacked out and went into a Catholic school and killed a bunch of kids or injured people. They went to this person's apartment or house, wherever they were living, and they found some, written materials like a manifesto and diaries and stuff, and there were images of Baphomet all over the place. So that's interesting that we're talking about that right now because that just happened today.
Wow.
And if you look at the Baphomet statue, it's a transgender. I'll just say it out loud like this, but it's the goat-headed god with boobs. It has boobs. It's
it's a hermaphrodite.
Exactly.
The word hermaphrodite comes from Hermes and Aphrodite. If you think about it, it's those words put together: hermaphrodite, Hermes and Aphrodite.
So it's interesting. The Baphomet connection is very pertinent to events that happened this morning. That happened today, August 27th, 2025.
That's scary. That really is. You know what? My friend just texted me. I have a little bit of an emergency. I got to finish up early, but I was seeing if we could do a part 2 because this was really good, Robert. We went for an hour, but I usually like to go a little bit longer. Would you like to come back on soon? I had something unexpected just happen I have to take care of.
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah, we can do this again, and I promise next time I won't mess up the dates.
Oh, no, this was awesome.
I've got to get a better calendar system going here. That's my problem. But yeah, take care of what you need to take care of. Friends come first, and I'll be glad to come back anytime you want.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people where they can find you and how they can follow you and stuff like that? And thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah, just MexicoUnexplained.com. That's a good place it's a good launching pad. You can go there and then you can see the books, the merch, the podcasts. I'm available on, I think, every single podcast platform there is. Just Google Mexico Unexplained or Google my name, Robert Bitto, and all my stuff will come up. And so I'm up for any other time that you want me to be on. And look for a surprise in the mail from me next week. You'll be getting
Oh,
your
that's awesome.
genuine
Yeah,
skull Day of the Dead made in Mexico. So
that's
take
amazing.
care of what you need to take care of, and we can come back anytime and resume the conversation.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, and I'll see you guys soon. Yeah, I got a little bit of an issue here, but yeah, I think it's all right. Yeah, I'll message you tonight, Robert, and thank you guys, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And all right, good night, everyone. Thanks, Robert.